Hi everyone, this is Nikki from the design team, and today I'm going to take you through a new Altenew hot foil plate. It's the Freesia plate, and it's this pretty flower with stem. We're going to use the hot foil, we're going to use its die, which is just to cut the little image out, and then we are going to use the stencils. Now I am super impressed with these stencils. The Altenew stencils come as a 2-pack, and you can see that they're actually labeled where you start. So you get your number 1 and your number 2. And then by the images, this is going to be very hard to see on camera, but it will tell you A1, so it labels the flower part as A and the stems as B, and it tells you which one to start with, which is really cool. We're going to use this as our background, and then for our sentiments, we're going to use this Pinkfresh hot foil plate. Now, if you haven't done it yet, make sure you hit the subscribe and like button so that you will get all of ScrapbookPal's videos. This right here are the 2 colors. So even though I'm going to do layered stencils, I'm only going to use 2 ink pads, and I'm going to create a layered look with that. So we'll have fun doing all of these things. Let's get started. I'm not going to talk a whole lot about the hot foiling process because there's tons of videos out there, but I am going to show you that I did use Glimmer foil and I used the matte gold. Okay, so there's a shiny gold, there's a shiny silver, and they also carry a matte gold and a matte silver. Okay, here's the reveal. This one just came right off, so you can see that matte, it does have shine to it, but it looks really great. So then you always want to keep your little foil piece. This one's stuck to the thing a little bit, but I'm going to keep this because I can make a whole nother image out of that leftover foil. So once you've foiled your image, then you can go back and die cut it. I'm sure you could do this ahead of time if you were real precise with your foil, but I like to die cut after I've foiled. That way, if I'm a little bit off on my foil placement, I'm still fine. So I just get that part done first, then I do the die cut. When you're die cutting this, I am going to tape it down, but when I put the tape on, I want to be careful that I'm not taping on foil. So I'm going to be very precise with my tape placement, try not to push it down in between so that I get this right. So here I'm going to try to just add it to the outside edges so that it's not touching the foil. Okay, and here's what that piece looks like, and even taking this tape off, I'm going to be as gentle as I can so that I'm not pulling on any foil. I think I've got it to where it's not sticking on it, but when you do a lot of foiling, you want to be careful because it just looks beautiful and you don't want to pull any of that prettiness off. So I got this. Now I'm going to take it and we're going to use those magical stencils. Okay, so for the stenciling, I'm going to use the Waffle Flower Media Mat, and I'm going to tape this stencil down, but I'm not going to adhere my actual die cut in any way, and it usually stays great. As long as I've got my stencil held down, then I haven't had any problems with it moving on me. If you don't have a mat like this, a silicone mat that can hold it, you could always add a little adhesive to the back, but make sure to cover up everything you don't want to use. And then we're using the Distress Oxide of Villainous Potion, which is a really good true purple. I'm going to start with my first layer, which is called A1 on the stencil. I'm going to start with this first layer and try to do a very light coat, and I'm going to move up in my darkness of the petals as I change to each level or each new area on the stencil. Let me just say, I'm already in love with this after just the first layer. So let's move on to our second layer. Now remember I said the stencil's labeled, see right there it says A2, so we're going to use this one for the next section of our A, which is the flower part of this image. Okay, so I'm using that same color, but I'm using a heavier hand. I'm even using the same brush that I was using, just pressing harder as I create this color to make it a little darker than our last one. All right, here's the reveal. Just slightly darker. You can always go back and lay your stencil down again and add more, which we may do at the end, but we're going to go on and move to A3 and do our darkest coat right now. So with this coat, I definitely did a much heavier hand, and I'm going to show you in the reveal that you'll realize that I needed to add a little bit more depth to my second layer to make this look correct. So you can always, that's a nice thing about stencils, you can, as long as you just are careful with how you lay them down, you can go back to the last layer. So here's the reveal of how dark that is. So now I know on my second layer I want to make it just a little darker, so I'm going to go back to the second layer and we're going to add a little bit more. So I go back in and I add just few more layers to this, just not to go as crazy as my darkest layer. And that's the nice thing about these ink blending stencils, is that you can go in and now look, that looks like 3 different colors, even though I only used 1 color and just different pressure. Okay, now we're gonna move to B1. So you can see it right here. This is gonna be our first layer of green. And so this, I mean, for me, green, it could be any color you want it to be. But remember, when you're setting up stencils, make sure you check all around that you're not gonna mess up your items. So the way that this lays on here, you need a couple of different Post-it notes to protect the rest of your stencil. So part of the top of the image and part of the stem are exposed and could get ink on them if you're not careful. So I'm just doing a really light coat of Mowed Lawn as my first level, and I'm going to use Mowed Lawn the entire time, but this is going to be our lightest coat. So for our second level of green, you want to do that same thing where you're using your Post-it notes to cover up extra parts. And I cannot stress how important that is, because I have messed up an entire image by accidentally going over on my stenciling. So just make sure you got it set up the right way. It's really fast, so it's going to save you time to not mess up your image, obviously. Here's the reveal of that second layer. Oh, that looks so good. Okay, now we'll do the third layer. With the third layer, I laid down a little bit with my main brush, and then I took this detail brush and really went in and added some extra darkness and depth to that last layer. Okay, all that's left to do is the stem here, and I'm just using that detail tool and trying to add like a shadow and just some difference in that, and so it's not all solid, basically, you know, like just making it a little darker in certain areas. So I don't know if that's even visible later to people, but to me it makes a difference. It makes me feel like I made it look cuter. So I'm going to do that a couple times, and then you still have the little middle of the flower up there. I don't know if you can see it. I'm going to put an arrow up. I don't even know if you have to do this because the gold foil really highlights that area, but I decided to take an even smaller detail tool and just add a little bit of purple. You could do this black, you could leave it just like it is, I think, and be perfectly fine, but I added a little bit of the purple to that area just to give it some depth, and it went on the foil. So I grabbed a little tool that I have and I added a piece of paper towel to it, and then I just went over where the foil was. I didn't wet it or anything. I just kind of wiped it down so that you could get back to seeing the beautiful gold foil again. And it took me a couple minutes, but it worked perfectly. So all that's left to do is to put this card together. I popped this Sending Hugs. Now this is from that Pinkfresh hot foil plate. I popped it up on 2 other pieces of cardstock cut out like this. And this is that same matte foil, matte gold foil. And then we're going to move on to the background. And this is from Pinkfresh Studio. It is a debossing plate, which doesn't cut the paper, but it creates a really cool image. So I'm going to add some foam behind it, and we'll be done with this card. Voila, here's the card. All of these items will be listed in the description, so make sure you check out those items if you're interested in shopping for them. Thanks so much for sticking with me on this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again soon on the channel. Have a great day. Bye!